All right, thank you everybody for joining our RV.NUG user group today. We are a hybrid user group that meets at least once a quarter in person in Roanoke or Salem, Virginia, and we have local members and we have members abroad. And we continue to bring you great speakers locally and virtually. And today is absolutely no exception. You've got Tom Becker presenting on one of the subjects that I've been waiting dearly for, Introduction to Blazor. Tom is a Microsoft architect at CapTech Consulting and is based in Richmond, Virginia, where he has lived for the past 17 years. After graduating from Randolph-Macon College in Ashland, Virginia, Tom has been working with Microsoft technologies since Classic ASP, all the way up to .NET 8. It's very nice. Thank you very much, Tom, for joining.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Appreciate it. My setup this evening is a little different. I had to come down to my our spare bedroom here. So I'm missing my extra monitors, so stuff's a little weird. It's because I'm working on the one. But I'll go ahead and share my deck here, and then I won't be able to see you guys anymore. So if you have questions, I'm not going to be able to see any raised hands or anything like that. So again, thank you for the introduction. I'm Tom Becker. I'm a director at CapTech Consulting. Been at CapTech for about 8 years now, living in Virginia and Richmond for quite a bit longer than that. I'm really excited to talk to you about Blazor tonight. It's an interesting topic. I think it's gaining a lot of market share, which is exciting. So I hope you guys enjoy the talk. And again, let me know if you have any questions that we're going through. You're not going to mess up my flow. It's very informal. And this is my first presentation virtually. So like this, that's not an internal company one on Teams and all. So please bear with me as best you can. So the agenda for tonight, we're going to talk about what Blazor is and what Blazor isn't. The different flavors of Blazor, because there's more than one. The pros and cons of using Blazor and the development cycle there. Most of the time we'll be in a demo, and then we'll have additional time for questions at the end. So what is Blazor? Every time we talk about Blazor, this scene from Dodgeball comes into my head. Allow me the pleasure of introducing you to Blazor. So Microsoft, just like Ben Stiller here, thinks he's funny. Blazor is a portmanteau of browser and razor. Get it? Blazor. I'm not sure where the L came from really, but that's what Blazor stands for. Razor in the browser. But what Blazor is a single page application development framework. So this is very similar to any other SPA development package you've used before. Everything's on one page. It does postbacks. It doesn't refresh the whole page, yada, yada, yada. But when people hear Blazor, first thing they normally think of is C# in the browser. And that's pretty much accurate. It's actual C# code running or can run inside the web application, web assembly area inside of your browser. So it downloads a bunch of packages, downloads a bunch of DLLs, and actually runs C# from your browser. And what this allows us to do is Blazor is an alternative to JavaScript framework, so Angular, React, or Vue. You can run JavaScript inside of Blazor, and sometimes you need to. But the bulk of your work will all be done in C#. So you're not going to have to write a lick of Angular code to show that panel or whatever. It's all going to be done via C#, and we'll show that during the demo. As I kind of alluded to, there are times when you have to use some JavaScript. So any browser level events. So just think of timeouts. So if you're just kind of sitting there and you want to queue your user, you've been idle for 10 minutes, whatever, and you want to, you're going to automatically sign out due to inactivity, that's going to be a place where you have to actually write some JavaScript and inject that into the JS interop for Blazor. But for the most part, if you don't have to do anything like that, then Blazor, no JavaScript, which is pretty awesome. So what Blazor isn't? Blazor is not Silverlight, and this is a very important distinction, or LightSwitch for those of you who use LightSwitch. Has anyone actually used LightSwitch or heard of that? Again, I can't see you, so you're going to have to shout out here for me. Any LightSwitch users?
Silverlight I have, not LightSwitch.
Okay. LightSwitch or LightSail. I get those confused, but yeah.
Yeah. So so everyone knows Silverlight. Good, bad, or otherwise, mostly bad. You had to download an additional plugin in the browser. It wasn't always supported. It was very finicky. It's very heavy, very kind of this gross thing to work with. Blazor is not that. Blazor uses web standards across the board, so it uses the WebAssembly WASM to run. So it downloads into that protected area inside of your browser and runs there and does everything in a standards verified method. There's no additional downloads, which is great. LightSwitch, for those of you who've seen it, it sounds like one or two may have seen it or may have used it. LightSwitch was very cool. I actually did a few applications with it. And it was really great on top of SharePoint. If any, I'm a recovering SharePoint developer. So you could really some nice SharePoint forms using LightSwitch, but it had its own proprietary like way to do things. It had this funky like JavaScript code behind thing. Anyway, Blazor isn't that either. Blazor is not a specific language for doing things. It's C#. You're going to see C# across the board. And if you're familiar with Razor pages for classic MVC stuff, then you're going to feel right at home here, which is going to be nice. So I'm going to pause here briefly. Does anyone have any questions on what Blazor is and what it isn't before we start talking about the different kinds of Blazor?
Do we still have to write? Go ahead.
No, again, I can't see you, so I heard someone talking.
But do we still have to know HTML and CSS nightmares and all of that? All that's still 100% applicable?
Yeah, CSS is still going to be there. HTML is still going to be there. You're just using C# to hide or show or modify the DOM.
Gotcha. So you can actually interact with the controls, but the controls are still HTML and CSS.
Correct. Yep. Any other questions before jumping to the next slide about Blazor flavors? All right. So we have 3 different Blazor flavors. We have WebAssembly, WASM, Server, and Hybrid. And I'm actually going to start in the middle with Blazor Server because that's the oldest one. And with Blazor Server, that came out in 2016. So it's been around for a little bit. And like I mentioned at the top, it's kind of gaining some market share, which is great. I don't think that this is kind of ramped up as quickly as Microsoft may have wanted it to. I think some of that is because of Silverlight still leaving that bad taste in people's mouth. But Server is a really cool, Blazor Server is a really cool piece of technology. If you've used SignalR before, this will look pretty familiar, but the Blazor team actually created a SignalR hub and their own compression algorithm to send messages back and forth between the server and the client. So any updates that you're making to the DOM are actually happening on the server. So that SignalR connection is going to go back and forth between the server and your client and actually make the changes upstream. So what that means is you need a constant internet connection for Blazor Server. There's no code actually running in your browser. So when I said Blazor is C# running the browser, that's true, but only for WebAssembly. Blazor Server, no code is running in the browser. Because of this, it's a little bit lighter than WebAssembly, so that's a good option to use if you're worried about size. One thing when I started reading about Blazor Server that kind of concerned me was use concurrency. So I have an open connection to the server that always has to be there, or else my application is not going to work. What does that look like if I've got a couple hundred people on it at one point? Well, Microsoft thought about that too, because of course they did, and they did a bunch of speed tests. And I don't know what the applications you guys have written. I have not written an application with 20,000 concurrent users yet. Concurrent user, so it's a pretty big size user base. And they took a Blazor Server application and put it on a mid-tier Azure VM. And it was once you hit about 20,000, that's when you start to see degradation in your response times. So that's pretty good, right? You're kind of limited to RAM. So if you're hitting that 20,000, maybe you've got a really popular application. You can just bump up the RAM or spread it out, however, and be good to go. So that's Blazor Server. Blazor WebAssembly is where we're going to be spending most of our time during the demo. So the WebAssembly is what people think about when you say C# in the browser. There's kind of 2 pieces to the WebAssembly. There's your server side, which is going to host your WASM package. And on your first hit of that site, it's going to download that to your browser. And then it'll also run some controller type web API type things. So this is what people think of when WebAssembly. And on that first hit, that package it downloads includes just a ton of .NET DLL. So everything it's going to need to run is going to be downloading that first package. So because of that, everything's running locally. So you can do things like progressive web apps. So you can have online and offline capabilities with Blazor WASM, but you can't do that with server. Also with WebAssembly, because that's a standard that's relatively new, older browsers aren't going to work. So if you poor unfortunate souls have to support IE, just any version of IE, Blazor WASM is out. You're going to have to use server. Does that make sense?
Ron is very sad.
Sure, no IE.
Please tell me you're not using IE 10.
Yeah,
Hell no.
but it will work in Edge. So that's all good. And then we have hybrid. And this one I have not used at all. Just read about, and I have an article at the end in my resources slide talking about this. But hybrid is kind of neat. You can write Blazor components and use them on native apps and devices for devices, but you have to use MAUI. So if you're using MAUI, which is the new Xamarin Maui is the replacement of Xamarin. Using that, you can write Blazor components there as well. So pretty neat. And one thing that's not out yet that I didn't put on the slide, because I don't know when it's going to be out, and because I'm using Blazor flavors, I'll call this a swirl. It's a combination of WebAssembly and server. So per page or per component, they're going to allow you to decide, is this a server-side component or WebAssembly component? So you can kind of, if something only should work if you're connected to the server, then you can do that, and then WebAssembly for your progressive web app type thing. So that's pretty neat that they're going there. I think that they're planning on that in a fast follow release for 8, I think, if I remember reading that correctly. But it's kind of, they're definitely working on that, so it's pretty neat. Any questions on the flavors of Blazor here before we go on pros and cons and then the demo? Give me a second to get some more.
This is the part that I get lost. I'm like, what am I supposed to do now?
There's a lot of options. Yeah, something to definitely think about at the beginning of your project. I haven't done a ton with server. Most of my work has been in WebAssembly just because I think that's going to be has longer legs. But server has been used by other folks at my company to great effect. And most of the apps that we write, I'm not sure about you guys, but there are a lot of internal apps. And so you're going to be always connected to the internet. You're not going to be writing that thick, thin client. So server is definitely a good option as well. Can't go wrong. All right. So pros and cons. I'm going to switch on a light here. Hopefully you guys can still hear me when I'm talking. It's really nice. This is one of the big pros for me. It's really nice to think in one language all day. I don't have to worry if I'm going to be at triple equals or single equals and where do I put my curly braces and that kind of thing. It's all in C#. So everything's the same on your client and in the server side. It's all existing stack, so it's an easier learning curve. All you backend developers out there, congratulations, you're now front-end developers too. So you don't have to worry about them ramping up on Angular, Vue, and keeping up with the different versions that come out every other week. It's just C#. So you're now all full stack developers, which is great. Thinking in one language all day, I found has a lot of quicker development cycles, and some of the shared code that you can pass back and forth between the server and the client just makes things a lot easier. I don't have to worry if I've added a property to my POCO, my DTO that I'm passing down. Did I add that to my interface in JavaScript and that kind of thing? And so there's a lot of industry support as well. So this isn't going away. This is going to be a long-term thing. And it's all, like I keep mentioning, it's all industry standards. Some cons though, each model has their drawbacks for hosting, whether needing to be continually connected to the internet or having a large upfront download. Each of those can be a drawback. Hot reload is a little bit finicky. May or may not run into that tonight during the demo, but sometimes it just doesn't refresh the cache appropriately. And you're kind of stuck wondering why. Well, I just changed that. It's not updating anything. So hot reload can be a little weird. You are limited to Microsoft Stack. Just as that's a pro, that can be a con. If you already have existing developers, friend devs that don't know Blazor, then it's going to be a bigger learning curve for them. So just as it's a pro, it's also a con. And last is the tooling. So there is a lot of tooling out there for Blazor. If you have a Telerik control that you really like, you're likely going to find it in a Blazor version as well. But not everything. They're not parity across the board. I've used some of the Blazor Telerik controls and they're great. But you might not find exactly the same thing. And as for forums and things out there, again, there's a lot of responses and a lot of people have used it. But again, it's not as much as some of the other frameworks that have been out longer. Okay. So before we jump to the demo, any last questions on that kind of stuff before we start looking at some code? All right, silence is acceptance. So I'm going to minimize that. And we're going to start at the command prompt. I'm actually going to create a new window here so I don't keep showing you infinity. All right. So we're going to create a Blazor server and Blazor WASM application. So we're just going to navigate to my folder here. And just to show you, there's nothing up my sleeve. I'm actually meant to delete that folder already. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. So we'll go ahead and make a new directory called NUG for a new user group. So again, just nothing on my sleeve. And this is kind of pre-baked. I do have a pre-baked version, just like Julia Childs, just to make sure that if anything goes wrong, I can show you a fully working copy. But nothing in here. So I'm going to say .NET new. And you guys can still see command prompt, right? I didn't check that before I started typing.
We can see it.
Okay, sweet. So .NET new, Blazor server. And I'm just going to name this one. I'm just going to do some scaffolding, some base stuff here. Take just a second. Okay, we have that. I'm going to open up code so we can look at the contents. And I am going to go into my server and the .NET run and let that start compiling in the background while we are looking at Visual Studio Code. All right, so I've got my server application here. You can see it created a bunch of folders, and we have a CS proj down here. Inside of our bin just popped up because we're doing the build. So we've got our index page, we've got some fetch data, we have a counter, that kind of thing. Pretty standard looking project. So let's see if this is finished. Nope, still building. So this project would look very familiar to you if you've done any kind of recent web API. This is using the minimal kind of framework. There's no classes or namespaces here, but this should all look pretty similar to a web API builder or program CS. So we have our builder, we're adding some stuff. There's our server-side Blazor. We're adding a singleton for our weather forecast service. If you've done a .NET new on web API, this is the same weather forecast you get over there. And then it does add some additional things, and then does this really neat map Blazor hub. So this is the Signal R bit that we were talking about earlier. And for those of you who've done Signal R in the past, this setup's a lot easier. Just that one line sets everything up, which is real nice. So let's see if it's done. Okay, so we'll go ahead and open this up so you can see the app, and then we will come back and look at some real code. There it goes. All right, just thinking about it. Okay, localhost, and bam, there it is. So you see how quick that was to come up once we hit the page. I want you to remember how quick that was in a minute. Okay, so we're going to circle back to get in our time machine, come back here in a minute. So we have our hello world. Welcome to your new app. We've got this How's This Blazor working for you. We've got a counter. You just click, 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 click. You know, moving around in here does not feel like we're making round trips to the server, does it? But we are. Every time we're clicking, we're making a round trip back to the server to actually do our work, because this is Blazor server. So I'm going to open up DevTools here and look at our network. I'm going to click on WebSockets and refresh the page so I can get an instance of it. Okay, there's our WebSocket. And let's see if I can put these side by side. All right, so we can see all these binary messages. They're pretty tiny. A couple, it's a little bit larger one. Most of these are just a few bytes. So every time we click, we can see that jump. If you look at the binary message itself, you can see it's dispatching an event. There's a click event. So it's sending all of this up to the server and back down with the re-rendered page. So now we see that 4. That must have been my 4th button click. So it's doing that WebSocket every time you click a button. Every time you move around on the page, it's hitting that. So it's pretty neat. It doesn't feel like it, does it? I mean, this is a pretty responsive application. And obviously, this is on my local host, and obviously, it's not really doing anything. This is not, you don't feel any lag anywhere. So what does happen, though, if your server does go down, so I've got it running here, Control-C, application shut down, immediately my application's gone. Can't do anything with it. So try and reconnect and then finally time out. Okay, so that's Blazor server. Let's look at a little bit of code of our actual Blazor page, excuse me. So let's look at our index. So pretty light here, right? Not a lot going on. It's a .razor, and what defines this as a Blazor page versus a Blazor component is this @page symbol. It defines the route. So @page / just my default route. We're setting the page title. We got a hello world, and then we've got this Blazor component. So we have a survey prompt. Look in our shared. We have a survey prompt razor. And we're passing in one property called title. How is Blazor working for you? So if we can still see this in the background, wrong one. Oh, anyway, you saw it on the screen. That's where that's coming from. So we can change that on the title, and wherever we use survey prompt, we'll have a different instance of that, which is pretty neat. So if we look at counter, this is a little bit more complex of a page. We have our @page symbol at the top. We're defining the route as /counter. And this one has a code block. So this is a combination of HTML and C# code that does something. The other one didn't have anything, just straight HTML. This one has a code block. We're defining a private variable and a method. Again, this is all C#, so this should look very familiar to everyone. And we're just incrementing the count. This increment count method, it's called on this onClick event. So we have our @ on click. And every time that happens, we call this method. And then we're displaying the count with this @ symbol. So this is just splatting whatever's in that variable on the page. It's the analog of the double curlies that you would use in Angular as an example. So just putting that on the page, whatever's there. Okay. So those are 2 pages.
Tom, quick question about the private. because I was looking at that earlier, and the private is private to the Razor file, not to the code block, right?
Right. It's Razor, private to this whole page.
Okay.
Razor page.
Is there a way to make a variable private to the code? Do you have to create like a block or something and then put it in there?
Blazor does not kind of differentiate between the two. It's the same
Okay.
component. So if it's a private on the code, it's a private in the Razor HTML page as well.
Okay, and it automatically elevates it to that level. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. So those are two pages with some code blocks. Let's look at the survey prompt, which has a code block as well. This one's just defining a parameter, and that's all this one's doing. So parameters are how the parent communicates with the child component. So we are passing a title as a parameter, and all parameters and injectables for that matter, and we'll see those in a few minutes, all are properties inside of Blazor. So you see my getters and setters, even though you can't get it on the parent because you're setting it, it's just a get and set. That's how they set it up. So add my parameter attribute, passing in my title, and then I'm using it up here just the same way we saw the counter. So at title on line 3, show whatever that is in that strong. Okay, so that's the basics for Blazor server. I want to show you some Blazor WASM stuff too, before getting into the bulk of the application we're going to be building today. So while this is queuing up, does anyone have any questions on Blazor server?
Nope.
Okay.
Actually, I got one question. I mean, how good is it when the connection is interrupted? Like, we had a few connection glitches. What's like, let's say a full disconnect, and I have to switch to, from a Wi-Fi to cellular.
Okay. So if there's a connection drop, you saw as soon as I stop that connection, you saw the connection retry. So it'll try to reestablish that connection for, I forget what the defaults are, but 8 times, and I forget how many seconds it waits. So if you're switching between and it's fast enough, you may not even see that that blip, but you might. I haven't used server a ton, so I don't want to speak. I don't want to give you hard numbers there. And actually realize I created that in the wrong spot. But if you're just switching like that, it should reconnect and establish the same connection.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So I've got now in the right place. So let me just CMake WASM and .NET run that guy. So while it's running, we're going to look at Blazor WASM. It's still in the same NUG folder. So just don't have to open up a bunch of Visual Studio codes. This looks pretty much the same. I've got my pages, and I've got counter and index. Index.razor looks exactly the same as the other one. So whether you're doing WASM or server or hybrid, all of these components are transferable. So you can pick up a Razor component and move it somewhere else. The only thing that changes is kind of the hosting model. So if you look at our program for our Blazor, it looks very different. This is it, just 12 lines. Really 11 lines, I guess, with the space. All this is doing is setting up a HTTP client and saying I'm going to run at this address. And that's it. So it's pretty light compared to the server. Still not a ton there, but everything else beyond the program kind of looks the same between Blazor, WASM, and server. So I'm not going to click through all the pages. Just take my word for it that they're the same. So that parameters and all that. But what's different here, and so remember I told you we're going to circle back to the load times here. So I'm going to click this, and it should open up in a new window. Great. And it's going to think about it. Oh, we have a loading screen now. Now it's doing a bunch of stuff. It's a lot different than the server, isn't it? That one was quick, and this one's thinking about it. So what's the difference? With that code at 100% and load up the page, bum, 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 everything looks the same. But the big difference here, and again, my internet, I don't know if I've been cutting out for you guys, for some reason not playing nice. And even from my local server, we had to download, it took a minute to download this 9.58 megs of resources. So that's the initial download of a scaffolded application that I did nothing to for Blazor. It's pretty big. So if we it loaded it from the network, and if we expand this, it'll list out all of the things it downloaded. So we've got our ASP.NET Core components. We've got some primitives here, JS interop we saw. We have our non-generic collection, specialized collection, all this stuff. Most of this we're not going to use. And for those of you who read quickly, at the top, it says this was built with linking disabled. So it's downloading everything. It's downloading the world. So if this was in release mode, that would be lighter, but it's still something to think about. Because every time you load this page, it's going to have to check and load all those resources from cache. So this is where it actually stores it. It's under application and cache storage. This is where all those DLLs we just looked at are. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see ours. So wasm.dll and PDB. So obviously, since it's a PDB, we're doing some debug debug symbols and that kind of thing. So that brings up an interesting Blazor WASM built-in release mode has a PDB, or not built-in release mode, has your PDB. So that's going to be easy for someone to decompile it and kind of look at your code. But even if you're not in release debug mode and using release, my DLL, I can still grab this and decompile it and look at all my code. So if you have something sensitive that you don't want some proprietary algorithm to do this, that, or the other, or if you have decryption keys or something that's hard-coded inside of your application, you're not going to want to use, or you're not going to put them in your Blazor WASM code that gets downloaded to the browser. And that's where the next kind of flavor of Blazor we're gonna talk about. It's still WebAssembly, but it's hosted WebAssembly, and it looks pretty much the same with one kind of big difference. So we'll look at that in just a second. But what I want to show, so I'm on the home page, Encounter. So still moving around. This one actually pulls data from somewhere else. It's not just in the browser like it is for or on the server like it is for Blazor server. So that took just a second longer to get, but still moving around is pretty quick. So I'm going to stop my server. And notice it's still here. I can still do things. All my code's in the browser, so I can still actually move around the page. Fetch data will fail because it's actually fetching data from a remote source from the server, and we've killed that, so that will fail. But all the other pages still work. So this is kind of the offline capability that you get with Blazor WASM. Okay. Any questions on Blazor WASM specifically before we talk about the hosted version of Blazor WASM?
So I noticed there's an error at the bottom there. What happened?
So the fetch data actually calls something on the server, and since I killed off the server, it can't request that.
I got you.
Yeah. But everything else that doesn't call the server is still working as expected. Okay, so we added the hosted tag or flag here for Blazor WASM. And you can see instead of a single CS proj, we actually have 3 now in a solution file. So things are a little more complicated now, which is good. So I'm going to navigate to WASM hosted and then server. So we're going to run the server project, not the client or shared. I'm going to say .NET run and let that go in the background. Okay, so moving back to Visual Studio Code. Close those and look at WASM hosted. So we have 3 folders: client, server, and shared. Shared, as you guessed it, is between server and client. That's your a lot of times going to be your DTO objects that are passed between your client and server. So here's a weather forecast. And just like I mentioned with the WASM code, anything that's referenced by client will have to be downloaded in that initial package. So with that, you'll have to make sure that anything in this shared is also okay to share outside of your company. So any proprietary logic or code, that kind of thing that you don't want out, you'll have to be just put somewhere else, basically. So WASM hosted client has all my pages. So these pages, again, look exactly the same as they did before. The program looks pretty much exactly the way it did before. The change is on the server. So the server does still a lot of things. It adds the Razor pages, it does some Blazor framework files, but also maps controllers. So what this does is create a web API controller that's exactly the same as any web API controller you've done before. So the hosted model works very well if you're doing a ground up, brand new greenfield development, and you don't have to use any outside services. Blazor WASM by itself, you'd have to write all those somewhere else, which you can do. But if you're kind of building it together, the hosted model makes things a lot easier. So these controller routes are on the same URL scheme as your host. So everything is just kind of very nice and tightly coupled in there. And then we have the shared, again, this is a C# class library. So again, this all looks the same. We have our local host, and it's going to spin up here. Going to get our loading screen because this is WASM. It's going to take a second to load. And
is that not caching because you're for development purposes you've got the caching block, or is it?
So this is a brand new application that we started, so it's going to download it new because of the URL, but it will cache it. So if we look at the console right now, it loaded this from network. So if I refresh this page, and I actually meant to show this on the last instance, you can see it's a bit quicker because it's loading it from cache. So the first time is your big hit. You still have to load all these things into memory on your browser, but at least you don't have to take the network hit in this instance. So yeah, sounds a lot quicker. So So we're just going to switch over to network tab. And if we click fetch data, it's actually hitting my server. Come off, go to all. So here's our weather forecast API using my same route that I would normally do with a web API. So it's calling that and getting my response of all my weather stuff that gets scaffolded out for me. Okay, so that's kind of the big differences between server and WASM. And I've been talking for about 35 minutes now and haven't really done anything all that interesting. So let's switch over to do something interesting. We're going to switch to Rider, JetBrains Rider. If you guys have used that in the past. If not, I recommend it. It's a pretty cool IDE, and I like it a bit better than Visual Studio. So we have our training log application that we're going to build today. So I'm a triathlete, and I want to have a spot where I can log all my runs, swims, bikes, all that kind of thing. So I wanted to create a quick application that I can do that. And in this training log application, you can see I've got 5 different projects. So we have our shared, our server, and our client. These are just what we got from the hosted WASM. I also have my infrastructure and client infrastructure. So this is a pattern that we've developed, and it works pretty well for how to split things out and make your Blazor projects a lot more reusable. So in the demos that I've done to learn Blazor, they all work, but they're not like code best practices always. And I wanted to show this demo in kind of a real world business-like scenario. So we've kind of split out a lot of the code. This is all in a GitHub repo that I've got a link at the bottom of my slide deck that I will send out after this. So you guys can go take a look. But basically, infrastructure has my DB context in it, straight entity framework kind of thing, some extensions, my models and mappings. This is all C# code. Not going to be interested in that. My shared has just a bunch of DTOs, a bunch being 3, but it has some TTOs in it that we're passing back and forth between the server and the client. So we're actually using the same class on the server and the client. So as soon as you make a change, it's kind of reflected in both, which is very nice. And the other project here is this client infrastructure. And this is just an injectable that we're going to use to kind of abstract away some of our logic to go to the server, calling HTTP client, and doing that kind of thing. So if I want to do something with the training, I'll inject the manager instead of injecting directly the HTTP client, so I can just manage everything in one spot. So if you see, you'll see this a couple times through the demo. It's just a wrapper basically for my HTTP calls. And I highly recommend doing that. You have more than one, most likely in a large application, but here we just have one. Okay, and for pages, I've just got index right now. So let's start this up. So I actually need to change into server here. And we'll say .NET. If I could type .NET watch run. So that's going to take a second to build, and we'll look at what this application looks like before we start doing stuff to it. This should automatically pop up the browser when it decides it wants to. Any questions while this is building?
Sorry, multiple mute buttons. I have a quick question. In the previous file you showed in the, it was kind of your manager folder, right? You had both the interface as well as the class in the same file. Typically when I've done like Angular projects, stuff like that, there's an individual file for basically every component broken out. So is this kind of, how would you say, it's almost like, what are the best practices for Blazor? You kind of implied that they're not really written yet. And so I'm just kind of asking why you did this. Is this best practice that you've seen so far, et cetera, things like that?
So this isn't, this pattern of having the interface and the class in the same file is not a Blazor pattern. That's just a C# pattern, right? Ideally, you'd have it moved out, but for smaller interfaces, ones that are only used for dependency injection, a lot of times I'll keep them in the same class or the same file for readability. But if that's not your standard, then that's fine. There's nothing wrong with splitting them out into 2 separate files. So this is a C# thing for me. It's not a Blazor thing at all. A lot of the Blazor demos that we've seen, like in doing the training through Microsoft, and there's another one called Blazor Pizza, all of your Razor components will get injected with HTTP client. So that's just scattered throughout your application, which you can do, and there's no problem with it. But then I have to know what all the URLs are every time I call, if I want to change something on a global scale, if I want to add something before the client to do this, that, or the other. You've got to go through your entire application to do it. So this is just encapsulating it. It's nothing wrong with the way that Microsoft shows it or Blazor Pizza shows it. It's just not built for code reusability. So.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Yeah, I wasn't asking for the right or wrong answer, more kind of your experience,
Sure.
your opinions from using it, because I haven't used Blazor. So
Mhm.
kind of these unwritten things, that aren't written down in any of the demos.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah. This is definitely something I highly recommend. In my production level applications, you'd have 10, 15, 20 of these managers for different things. I just kind of lumped them all in one for the demo. But yeah, so you'd only inject the training manager when you need it, and you'd add, I don't know, your races manager somewhere else, so you wouldn't have the same HTTP client there. And yeah, just kind of basic code reusability, code architecture that you would do in your back end. You'd want to make sure you apply that to your front end as well, because it all is C#, which is nice.
Hey Tom, this is Lewis. So I've written 2 Blazor applications, mostly because I'm brand new to C#. So I've just kind of been learning everything, building things as I go, and I come from the PHP world.
Okay.
And so I find myself building pages like I'm going in and out of PHP mode, because that's just how my brain works.
Sure.
And I feel like that may not be the greatest way to approach certain components. So I was just wondering, maybe, I know this is without the context of knowing what in the world I wrote, but kind of what your opinion is on that.
So having your code interspersed with your HTML, like in PHP and classic ASP, is going to feel very similar here in Razor. So that mindset may not be the worst to come from when coming with Blazor. I'll show in a bit how I like to break things out, so it's not all in one giant page. But yeah, we'll go through some of those best practices on how to structure some of your code and create reusable components, so you can build your Blazor application in a quote business-like best practices type manner.
Perfect. Thank you.
So any other questions? Yep.
Yeah, hooking into what Lewis said, I can see one drawback, because it kind of ties in what I asked about the private. Since everything that's in code is basically global for your page, you may not realize that the scope of certain things is the whole page, instead of just that little section of PHP code that you were doing.
So, and that's where breaking out components really shines for Blazor. So we'll be creating a couple of different components, and even though that component is on a page, any private variables will be still scoped to that component. So you won't be able to access it on the global scope.
Cool.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, cool. So this is our application. This says hello world. That's all that's there right now. Again, just want to show nothing up my sleeve here. So this is my index page that we just saw. And cardinal rule for demos is to never write code. So I am going to just snake a bunch of that and paste it over here. So I've got my code block and I've got my injectable. I'm going to import my missing references. That should go away. I'm going to comment out a few lines here. Then I'll explain what we're doing. Okay. So we have our page, our page directive. We're importing some references. This should look very similar to any C# page you've done before. We've got our page title, just like we had in the past. We've got a div that just has my header and has a button that's going to click, show add modal. So what we're going to be building up to is showing a modal on this page to add a new event. And then we iterate. Let me just format this document real quick. Let's see. Files, wrong keystroke. Make it look a little prettier here. There we go. Okay, so we're going to loop over this for each, this training events object. It's a list of training events. And for each one of these, we're going to display this div. So in that div, we're just splatting a bunch of properties. So title, distance, duration, comments. And then based on the event type, I actually want to change what CSS I'm going to apply to that div. So this is inline inside of a div, and I have a ternary. So if event type equals 1, I want to apply the class of run. Otherwise, I'm going to apply the class of bike. So you can put this @ symbol, which denotes code, kind of anywhere. And if you have it in a paren, it's kind of a single line. If you have it on a curly brace, it's kind of multiple lines. So that's my for each loop. And then we come down here to code. Here's my code block. I'm injecting my training event manager that we looked at earlier. So it's very simple to inject something using the inbuilt dependency injection framework. You just add the inject symbol. It has to be registered, of course, just like you would in any other dependency injection. But just inject it there. And we've got my list of training events, got my modal Boolean that's not being used at the moment. And then we call this method, or this method gets called, we don't call it specifically, onInitialized async. So this is the method that when this component is first like shown on the screen, what I want to do. This is my page load event. For those of you who've done classic like ASPX pages, this is my page load. There are other ones like parameter set or should render, so you can check permissions there. There's a few different options, but onInitialized async and onInitialized, there's synchronous versions of this as well. And the parameters set are the ones that you're going to use the most. So on my page load, I'm going to load my training events. And this training events is just calling out to my code behind, or not my code behind, my server, and populating that event. And then we'll talk more about these later. They're not being called at the moment. Okay, so I'm going to save that. I'm going to rebuild everything. So we should see that going down here in the bottom. And then I'm just going to pop up the screen here. Just going to think about it. Do all the builds. Starting the server, setting database. We should be back here any second. And oh man, what happened? My reload, I've got an error, but it still showed up. So I still got my events here. So I have an error, but what I wanted to show is still there. Let's look at our console log and see what happened. So Blazor does do a pretty good job of you line numbers and things like that. Things break. Today, right now, we have everyone's favorite object ref not sent to an instance of an object. So where is that breaking? Let's see. Index line 13. Index razor, and let's go line 13. My for loop. Okay. Does anyone have any guesses on why it's not breaking? Why I got that error? Here's my training events. Set up. All right. Well, I'll just tell you. I didn't actually create a new one. So this object was not initialized. I initialized it in my page load method. So I set it here, but the page rendered before my call to my backend finished. So this is a pretty common error when you're first developing in Blazor. You're going to initialize things, but the HTML DOM rendering waits for no man. It'll just show it immediately. And if you're using a object that has not been initialized, it will break. So here, if there's nothing there, it's not going to go through my for loop, which is fine. So I do that. But if you need to display a waiting message, a lot of time the pattern, and we'll see this in a bit, will be if this thing exists, show my form as an example. Otherwise, show a loading message or that kind of thing. So you'll test for object existence before doing your work. So we're rebuilding here. Should come back up, and this time we should see shouldn't see an error. So I'm going to click off that just so it doesn't stick around longer than it should. Started, send in the database, refresh. All right, 100% good, and so great, no errors, fantastic. So we have our training log. This looks terrible, so let's fix that. This page is fine. You can add styling down here. I can add a style block and have everything on one page. But that's not really how I like to work. And it's not really great for code reuse. So on this index page where we're not doing really anything, we're already at 72 lines. So if you have a pretty complex page, you can imagine that the combination of the HTML and the CS is going to get, C# code is going to get rather long. So what Blazor allows you to do is to create code behind. So again, those of you who've done ASPX, this is going to feel very familiar. We're actually going to create a code behind file. So index.razor.cs. It's going to nest it under there for me. And we're going to say partial. And then I'm going to take everything in this code block. Get rid of that code. And put it over here. Before, I'm going to add my references. Okay, so now we're back to where we were. That error should go away any second now. So we can actually remove those using this as well, since we're not doing those. So as a part of this Razor page, I want my CSS. So I can do that the same way I did my code behind file. So I'm going to say index.razor CSS. I'm going to grab from my snippets here. CSS. Set there. Save. Should be rebuilding. Okay. So this page is starting to look a bit better. A little cleaner. We don't have our code in it. It's just HTML. We have a nice separation. And we'll let that refresh here. So it'll take just a second.
While that updates, I have a question.
Absolutely.
So I am a Tailwind Andy. I used Tailwind once and I never looked back. I am struggling to find a way to implement Tailwind into Blazor applications.
Okay. I have not used Tailwind, so I cannot. I'm afraid I'm not going to be the guy to answer your questions on that.
Okay. Okay. Well, darn.
Yeah.
We'll get there one day.
Yeah. I've heard Tailwind's nice. A lot of people swear by it. Sounds like you really like it as well. It's great, but yeah, I haven't had a chance to use it. So.
Yeah. Well, be careful.
Go back, huh? So my training log's updated. I have some better formatting now, which is nice. So you see I've got my runs. They're now in red. Everything else looks the same. So I've got my CSS and I've got my index page, and this is all working pretty well. But I still don't like this index page. This feels like a lot of code that could be moved somewhere else. Maybe I want to use this view again in a different part of my application. So let's make this a shared component. Let's make a Razor component out of this and kind of clean up this index even more. So I'm going to add a Blazor component. I'm going to call it view main event. And while we're here, we're going to go ahead and add some code behind too, because that's our best practice that we talked about. Man, my life would be so much easier. All right, there we go. Just like before, I'm going to make this a partial and get rid of the underscore Razor that I'm just trying to be so helpful with. So inside of here, we're just going to have a parameter. Add that. And then we're going to make a public training event PTO. For my missing references, and let's call it training. All right, so that's all I want to do in my code behind. So just to declare a parameter. On my view side, I'm going to get rid of that code block and the H3. I'm going to steal from my Razor this div, my index Razor, steal that div. So cut that and paste it here. I have a capitalization difference between training event and training event. So let's just fix that.
Yeah, this mirrors what I used to do with Razor pages back in the MVC days.
Yeah, just kind of move everything out and just make it all reusable components. It's the way to go, for sure.
Make it work in one place, and then the stuff that gets reused, move it to a component as soon as possible.
Yep, you got it. Same idea here in Blazor. Yeah. So we have a view training event. So let's move that into our index. There's our view training event. Code completion, you want to. There we go. And then our training event parameter. And we'll say this is a training event. So we use the @ symbol inside the property to say this is an object, right? If I just put training event, it would treat it as a string, which is not what we want here. So now our index page is looking a lot cleaner. Now we don't have all this reusable stuff or a lot of extra stuff we don't need. It's just kind of really nice and tight there. So let's pull back our training log, see what that looks like. Dun, dun, dun. Did I hit save in the middle again? Yeah. All right. It's got to rebuild one more time. So normally in my development cycles, I wouldn't keep .NET watch run on all the time. I'd write a bunch and then test it out. But for the sake of this demo, it just makes it easier to keep it up all the time. So that does kind of slow down a little bit here, viewing everything, but just makes it easier instead of having to watch it every single time. Okay, so we're started. So should come back up momentarily. Okay, so now it should come back with our training logs. Well, what's going on here? We had this nicely formatted. What changed? Well, our CSS is still here, right? We didn't delete it. Does anyone have an idea why it's no longer working? You guys, I didn't tell you at the beginning this would be interactive. I'm sorry. Comparing debugging here. Sorry. So what happened is Blazor will.
We can have the answer. We don't.
All right. So Blazor will it scopes your CSS to your component. So when I added CSS to my Razor page, it actually scoped it to just that page, and I won't use it anywhere else. So if we do an inspect here, you can see these weird letter and number combinations. So this is what Blazor is using to identify which component that the CSS should belong to. Sorry, my 3-year-old came in the room. Sorry. So because that CSS is scoped to my index page, it's not going to apply to my view training event, even though it's on the same page. So let's fix that. So if I add a new style sheet called view training event.razor CSS and steal all the code out of my index Razor and put it in my CSS over on my view training event Razor and refresh that. Should just take a second to reload, and then it should reload here. Should be looking much better. Okay, started. Should refresh. All right, so now we're back in business. So let's just take a look at that CSS again. So now that it's actually on my component, you can see it has the same code here, B-P3V whatever. My index page has BW- whatever. And if you look at the compiled CSS for my event, it adds this attribute to the side. So this class will only apply to any DOM element that has this attribute on it. So that's how it works with the CSS, and that can be quite finicky sometimes. So if you want to share a style across your whole Blazor application, you'd move that up to your wroot CSS up here, to your app CSS. But if you only want something scoped very narrowly to a component, then you'd move it over here, underneath your component. Does that all make sense? Everyone with me on that?
Yep.
Awesome. Yep. All right, so now that we have a way to view the events, and it's all nice and tight on this one component, now I want to add one. So I'm just going to grab the name of my new event here. So let's add to our shared component a new Blazor component called add new log event. So I want to create a brand new thing here. So just like before, I'm going to add a code behind. Yes. So I'm going to grab all of this, put in my code behind, save that, and I'm going to grab my form body and put that in my Razor page. Okay, so what did I just add? On the Razor side, I added a new section that has a bunch of inputs in it. So these inputs should look very similar. This is all using kind of Java Bootstrap format for my groups, for my inputs. So I got my form group, my label, and then my input class. So I am binding this input, and this is two-way binding. I'm using this @ symbol. So I'm going to bind this input to this property on this object. So I've got a new event object. It's a DTO in my shared section here. So new training event DTO. And then I'm binding the event title. So I can do that for just normal inputs. I can do that for selects. So here I'm binding just an ID, and here I'm iterating over my drop-down list. So every event in my drop-down list will be shown here. I can do that for dates and text boxes and text areas. So anything you can bind, any form control that you want to use, you can just use that bind symbol, and you'll be off to the races. And then on the button, I've got an on-click that calls save log. So that all works from the back end with this add new save log Razor. And we've got this new parameter type. So I've got a parameter, just like I did before, but I have this event callback. So this is how a child would talk to the parent. So we talked earlier about the parameters, just normal parameters. If it's like a string or something, or object, you can make it whatever you like. Would be how the parent talks to the child. Event callbacks are how the child talks to the parent. So on save successful, I'm going to tell the parent I did something. Whatever you want to do with it, go ahead, and just kind of alerts up. The parent can listen for it or just kind of drop it, depending on the need. But callbacks are how Blazor talks to the child, talks to the parent. Okay. So I've got my injectable for my training event manager again. I'm newing up my event. So we're not going to run into that same problem we did last time where we got the null reference exception because we're creating a new one and we're defaulting the event date due today. On my event initialize, I'm doing this edit context. We're going to come back to that in a minute. So just ignore that for now. And then we're calling load event types, which is going to populate my dropdown. All right. So let's see that in action. Got to put it on the page first. Sorry. Well, we'll see that in action in a second. So my index page, I'm going to say at if, and that show modal we weren't using earlier. So if show modal, I want to call add new log event. And on save successful, I want to call training log saved. And all the training log saved is going to do is just refresh the list so we see a new instance of it. Okay. So this is my callback on my index page. Let's take a quick look. There's really nothing going on with it. So it's training log saved, just a method that's going to show or hide rather that new panel and then reload my training events. All right. So let's see that in action. We're getting into the home stretch, people. I know it's been we're talking about an hour now, and we got just a few more things to show, and then we'll close it down for the day. Okay, so show my training event, and click add event. So you see that it got longer, just put it down here at the bottom. So this doesn't look very good. It's just kind of here. I'm guessing you can see where I'm going to go with this. We're going to create a modal. We're going to create a reusable component. Before we actually click save here, we're going to create this reusable component so it looks a lot better because I don't like how that looks. So again, we're just iterating and making things look a lot better. So we're going to grab this thing called modal wrapper. And we're going to create a new shared component. And we're going to paste everything here. So our modal wrapper, I'm going to leave this as one single file. I'm not going to move the code to the back end. You guys know how to do that. It's just to save a little bit of time. So we've got a div here that's going to use our modal. This is Bootstrap modal. It's going to act as a dialog box. And we've got a header, and then we've got child content. So in our code, we have our parameter string modal header. You guys are used to seeing this by now. And then we have this thing called a render fragment. So we only have one render fragment here. So by convention, that's called child context. If you have more, you can name them whatever you like. You can name this one whatever you like, but just by convention, it's child content. And what this says, anything between my open and close tag of modal wrapper, I'm going to just paste or just splat in here. So a render fragment is a bunch of HTML that you want to show in a child. So you can have multiples of these in one Blazor component, and you can really kind of make really reusable and robust components to use in your application, which is pretty neat. So we have modal wrapper. So let's go ahead and wrap our modal. Modal wrapper. Modal header will be add log. And I'm going to add a new thing here as well called reference. So I want to be able to reference this modal wrapper from my code behind. So I called that, I commented out, add log event modal. I'm just going to uncomment these while I'm here. Copy it so I had it and not bad finger it. So add log event modal. So type modal wrapper, and that modal wrapper had a open and close. So this is just how I'm going to open and close my modal. So we go back to my reference here. So there's modal wrapper, and I want to put my log event in my modal wrapper. I notice I don't have child context there. It's not needed. Child content. It's not needed since there's only one. But if I wanted to add it, I could. So I can be very explicit with it. And if you had more than one, you would just say child content and then your next one and put whatever you wanted there. All right, so that's my modal wrapper. And save my code behind as well. That should a reference. Just add that in. Okay. Save. Okay. So this, if you're using any like Telerik controls or things like that, you'll have a lot of different And being this render fragment, you'll have that'll be a very common pattern when you're building a lot of reusable components. And again, this one just has one, but it's pretty powerful stuff. So you can see it a lot. So we'll wait for this, and then we'll see what happens. All right, starting the server, refresh. Okay, so let's add our event. Oh man, we got another error. What happened now? Everything worked a minute ago when we clicked that button. So what's happening with this? Let's look at our console log. We have everyone's favorite object ref error. This is on index razor.cs, so this is the code behind line 30. Let's see what we're doing over there. So line 30 is saying that our add log event modal.open is not working. So this object is not initialized. Well, it's true. We didn't set it here. This is a property, but we definitely set it here. So we set the reference, and this is part of the HTML, but it's not shown. And there's a sneaky reason for that. It's because of this if statement. So when the page first rendered, this if statement wasn't shown. This body wasn't shown. This wasn't a part of the DOM. So that reference, it was not bound yet. So you need to be careful of where you're defining things or your order of operations of when things show. I am calling the show add modal equals true here, but the DOM hasn't updated yet because I haven't finished that life cycle. So just like in JavaScript, you have to think about that. You have to think about that in Blazor as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove my show add modal and see what we got this time. Because now it's always going to be part of my DOM because there's nothing hiding it. There's no statements there. The computer's getting very hot. I'm trying to prop it up a little bit so I don't melt anything. All right, that should be fine. Okay, so that should refresh now. Add event. And now we have our modal, which is great. It doesn't look great. I'm not a CSS guru. I can make this look better, but you know, this is the modal we have for today. So, but this allows you to format your modal across the board. So I can just reuse that modal wrapper and put whatever component I want in there, and it's going to look exactly the same every time across the board. So that's definitely good for code reuse. So that's all well and good. And I've got my form here, so I can say hello from today. I don't know, something. Make a swim. Let's say we did it today, and we did 1,400 meters. And it took whatever. Click save. Oh man, another error. What do you think happened this time? This one actually wasn't expected. So let's see what's complaining about there. A SQL error. That one's weird. I'm not sure why that's why that one popped up. Okay. Not sure why that one popped up. That was not expected, actually. So there's a precision. Oh, distance was screwy. Okay, got it. So let's just say 5. There we go. So hello from today. We made it a run at the end. Distance was 5. I made it apparently a pretty small decimal when I set up my database there. But here's the thing we just entered. Okay, so now we have a modal, and it makes a round trip. It does add stuff to the database. But let's say I wipe all this out, and I didn't clear this intentionally to test something else, but we're right up on time, so let's skip that. So I'm going to click save, and I'm getting another error. This error was expected. This one is a bad request. So I didn't enter anything, so I just have empty data, so it doesn't match what my required fields and things like that on my DTO are. So using our data annotations, event title and duration should be required, and the string comments should only be a max length of 20. So I want to show that before getting back to our back to the database, right? So if you look at our network call for training log, the response here says the duration field is required, event field is required. I want to have that on the front end, so I don't have to make a round trip to get there. Pretty standard thing for error logging or error tracking before. So let's add that in. So I'm going to take my edit context, and I'm going to go to my front end for my Razor. I'm not going to change the back end at all, just the front end. And I'm going to add this thing called event form. Edit form, excuse me. So edit form is a form. It's something that you're going to edit. It renders down to a form if you look at the HTML. And I'm saying this is the thing I'm editing, so my edit context. And on valid submit, I'm going to call save log. So my button down below no longer has an on click on it. It's just a submit button to submit my form. Everything else is pretty much the same with the addition of these validation messages. So edit form is inbuilt Blazor, as is this data annotations validator. So this validator is going to use reflection and look at my DTO or whatever object I'm using and says what's going to be required and what are my max length. So any data annotations you're going to add, it will respect. And you can add custom ones too, which is really nice. We did that on a client to make sure you select at least one thing, or like a list of 5, and we added a bunch of custom validations, and they all were very well respected and easy to use inside of the Blazor. So with this data annotations validator and my validation messages, now I'm going to get some much better user experience from not letting them submit the form until we have all of the required fields. So we would show the messages by calling this validation message. Again, this is an inbuilt Blazor thing. So we're saying this is the validation message for event title. And whatever it's there, it's just going to display. You see I don't have any CSS or anything else here. So it's just going to use kind of standard CSS for Bootstrap. It'll show up as red kind of thing. So let's go ahead and add our event. And if I click save here, I'm getting some error messages. So the event title field is required, which is the exact same message we saw on our 400 message from the server. So that one data annotation is now doing double duty on the front end and on the back end, which is really nice. So if the comments I said was max length 20, right? So if I add this in here and click save, we're going to say keep it brief. So if I want to up that and make sure it's respected across the board, I only have to do that in one spot. I can't tell you how many times I forgot to do that on like Angular or something like that, where I've got to do it in 2 different places. So I updated the back end, but I didn't update the front end, so they were still getting errors. And it just having that shared block between both your client and your server and having it use the same exact thing to do the same exact work makes it so much easier. So your repetitions going through your cycles developing can go a heck of a lot quicker, which is all right. So that's where I want to kind of end it. We've been talking about 1 hour and 20. So I want to stop it here for the demo. Does anyone have any questions before we switch back over to some to the PowerPoint to wrap things up? Anything else we want to see in here from today?
Any benefits, or does this change security in any way, or is there any benefits? Or I guess if I'm implementing, login on my page, would I approach it any different than from a ASP.NET web page?
Yeah, so you can use a lot of the same structures that you would in a normal like web API to secure your backend. And on the front end, there are allow. There is a inbuilt Blazor component to like show and hide sections, and I forget what the syntax is off the top of my head. I could go look it up, but you can use your JWT token, hook that into your front end as well, and you can have like show hide panels, show hide pages. So you have to be authorized. Maybe is it authorized? Maybe that's the. Authorized either. Okay, I don't know the syntax off the top of my head, but there are inbuilt controls for Blazor that allow you to show hide either whole pages or panels based on your security profile. But yeah, you can use the same kind of structures for setting up your security that you would in any other ASP application. Any other questions? Let's get back to some PowerPoint here. We're helpfully asking for questions. All right, if there's nothing else, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm trying to get back into it. As you probably saw one kid come in here. I've got a couple others. So it's been a while since I've been on the speaking circuit. So thank you for allowing me to come to you virtually tonight. I've got some contact information up here on the screen. You can email me at rvaprogrammer@outlook, and I'm on, I guess, X or Twitter at rvaprogrammer as well. So feel free to reach out and connect if you have any questions, things you want to follow up on later. I've got a couple of resources here if you want to get started learning Blazor. The GitHub for this specific project is at that first link there. And I have some other training links to learn Blazor from Microsoft. is the top one, and then a really good GitHub for Blazor Pizza. That one is where I started. It was very good. I highly recommend that one. And then some other just links for that speed test I was talking about, where they hit like 20,000 concurrent scenarios, and then links for the new Blazor hybrid mobile binding if you wanted to take a peek at that. All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns that you guys want to talk to tonight? Switch back over so I can see you guys.
No, very awesome, Tom. Let me drop a link in the chat as well. This is a .NET modernizing thing from both Telerik and the C# Foundation. I think they did it. It's pretty intense. This is taking an existing application and modernizing it on all kinds of sites. So it uses Blazor as well.
Great. I mean, I don't think I've seen that one, so thank you.
Yeah. Word of caution: when we went through the training, we spent an hour bug shooting the first setup. So it does require some time.
Okay.
A good day or so to go through it.
What flavor of Blazor is this, Ron?
What flavor of Blazor? What do you mean?
Server WASM.
Oh, I think it's. I think I went to WASM. I don't think I got that far because I got stuck on that first time.
Well, don't feel bad. My mind is blown too.
Yeah.
So, I guess from the perspective of someone who is just getting into the .NET C# world like myself, how much of a priority should I make learning Blazor?
So, as I said at the top, like Blazor's been out since 2016 in one form or another. Servers the first, as I mentioned, but I don't think the market share has grown a ton. I think Microsoft is pushing for it. They want more people to go there. And I'm a consultant, right, at CapTech, and our first foray into Blazor was not actually our idea. So you know, it's coming into. We're getting more questions about it, but it's still not a front and center thing. Very helpful to know to round you out, but if you're just learning C#, I would maybe more focus on the back end to start, because that. Once you know the back end, picking up the front end, you already know PHP, so you know some HTML, CSS, you'll be able to pick that up real quick. So I would focus on the back end would be my advice. Yeah,
that's what I realized kind of messing with it. It's like that front end part of my mind is just like, it's just intuiting a lot while I'm working.
And just like PHP is a scripting language, having that switch between HTML and then a code block and modifying things along the way, Blazor is very similar in that regard. So if you're familiar with that, then it should, once you know C#, you'll pick up the rest quick.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So ASP.NET MVC, or is that what you're thinking, or what brings it back in?
It's like a web API. So I mean, people still. I haven't seen anyone. Again, your mileage may vary. Different clients do different things, but I haven't seen anyone do an MVC app in a while.
Really? Okay. So
it's been
web API in the back end, and then like SPAs or other sort of apps in the front.
Yeah, pick your JavaScript framework of du jour. React has been a popular one recently. Angular is perennially popular. So using the web API and then just a generic
gotcha.
front end.
Gotcha.
I've been working through a master
Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.
And, I kind of like the idea of, like Tom said, if you're new to C#, focus on core C#. Don't worry about the front end or the Windows versus the web frameworks yet. Focus on that first. Maybe do a console app. Maybe play around with little WinForms or web forms. Maybe skip MVC. Maybe do Blazor. But do one thing, and then go pick up the other thing and try and duplicate what you did in the other, and then you'll start picking up things that you wouldn't have picked up if you just did one thing to specialization.
Yeah, if you know Blazor, you know
stuff.
Yeah, what's good learning resources you recommend for somebody starting out?
In C#, MS Learn. If you haven't been out there, you're missing out. They have a lot of great content there. They step you through it. Some of it can be done in the browser even. So that's usually my recommendation. Is MS Learn is a fantastic resource.
Yeah, there's been a I guess it came out just a month ago or I think about a month and a half ago. Microsoft and Free Code Camp came together and put out like this certification. And it's on the Microsoft Learn platform. And I've been going through it. I'm like 10 lessons away from completing it. Feel
a
great.
lot of consultants that want to learn C#, that's where we push them as well. And that certification is great. So yeah, that came out a few months ago, whenever it was. But yeah, I saw that. That's fantastic. I'm glad Microsoft is focusing on those certifications again. There used to be like C# certs. Now everything's just Azure certs. So now focusing a little more on the C# side, which is good.
It almost seems like they're opening up the certs a little bit more, so it's not as going to be as restrictive of who can actually verify that you're actually now certified in the testing, making it. And I think that'll make it more robust as they keep adding stuff to .NET. I don't think .NET's going away in the next 10 years, 20 years.
No.
Yeah, I would definitely look at MS Learn. And if you find yourself bored there, go on YouTube. There are other people on YouTube. There's a guy named Tim Corey who does some free stuff on YouTube. He also has some masterclass and other courses that are for pay through a website. Another guy named Nick Chapsis, who's always speaking at the .NET Conf, is also very good. And then as you watch them, they'll occasionally mention other people who are talking about things. Maybe find a technology you want to know more about, put it in YouTube, and you might find a place to start doing something. I did that when I was trying to figure out what the heck was Angular, because I'd done React, but not Angular a few months ago. And I found like 3 different ways to do Angular. That's interesting. Yeah. And when I looked at Blazor after that, I was like, well, this reminds me of Angular, but it reminds me more, like you said, of PHP. What it was like writing everything in one place, and the code just kind of went away to the browser, but it was still sort of there hidden.
Yep.
Right. I'm also working through this ginormous book.
On that 6, I mean, you'll learn enough there, but that's not out of support here soon. 7 will be, or 8 will be out next month, and that's the next long-term release. So
yeah,
I haven't seen that book in a while. Hit for C#.
Yeah. So I guess safe to say, I mean, there's a lot out there. There's a lot of really good resources. At least I've seen there are a lot of really good resources for people who are coming in to learn C#. Within like a month's time of me kind of just hitting all of this like really hard, I feel like I've learned a lot. So there's a lot available there.
The other thing I'll say is the other thing that Microsoft has done better in the last 2.5 to 3 years is, for a while there, we had this split ecosystem between .NET Core and .NET Framework. Yeah. And while the C# kind of looked the same, some things didn't translate right away without a lot of work. They've started to bring things way back together, so that if you learn something over on the framework side, you may find out the syntax looks very similar on the new C# side, but not always. There's still some things that are not one-to-one between the APIs. Mm-hmm. There's still a lot of people doing .NET Framework. I interviewed for a position in Lynchburg. They're still looking for a .NET developer out there to work on their stuff. I think AWXT was the company, if anybody's looking. But,
cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Tom, for coming over here and showing off Blazor. I like the style you demoed it, and I really appreciate all of the demos rather than slides, of course. I also especially like that your app called you out, and it's like, yeah, you didn't do that distance. No, error.
That's fair, 100%.
Nope, it wasn't having it. It's like, yeah, buddy.
Yeah, keep it real. Yeah.
And your style of demonstrating it's very useful. It's because it's I think how most of us code. Because at least unless you guys code differently, I'm going to embarrass myself. I make a dozen errors and I keep trying to fix, and then finally it works. I'm like, thank God, next line of code.
Pretty much.
So appreciate you showing the errors, because that's what we see the most, I think. So that was really good. My mom was definitely blown, and if you guys have more questions, come next Thursday. Next month, November 2nd. That's the first Thursday of November, and find out how you can ask your questions to ChatGPT in our session with Mike Benkovich on working with ChatGPT for developers, a hand-on approach. So come check that out.
I might have to sneak in for that one. You guys come in.
Maybe ChatGPT will make less than a dozen errors every line of code. So.
I was using it for something in Azure, and I asked it a question, and it gave me the wrong answer. Like I tried, the thing wasn't there. Like it was like an XML block that we needed to add for a policy somewhere, and that wasn't supported. So it does make errors. ChatGPT is not infallible.
Especially
good to know.
Different versions of the code than what it expects. I had a business object issue, and it was giving me 4.1 instead of 4.3 solution. It's like, yeah, it doesn't work for me then.
Yeah. I find ChatGPT really, at least for me, I find it really good for starting ideation.
Mm-hmm.
Just getting my ideas flowing in my mind, just prompting thoughts for myself to work through a problem. But I don't think I've ever successfully got it to solve the problem for me.
I did it once with a SQL query. It started using something I hadn't seen before. It's like, hey, wait a minute, that's actually pretty cool. I didn't know you could do that in SQL.
Yeah.
it's another tool. It's a tool under your tool belt, and just like we wouldn't be developers today if we didn't know how to Google, right? Imagine a developer that doesn't know how to Google. Now, I started development back in the early 90s. There was no Google. You had books. That thing that you had in your hand, Louis, that was it. That was like you seeked out those books and you learned every single page and you read it multiple times. That was how you learned. Now, I mean, you still learn that way, obviously, but it's all, Google everything, and then, hope you have the enough knowledge and experience to know what to pick. That's the trade, benefits. Now, ChatGPT is just one more thing, one more place that you can go say, hey, I find it very useful for scaffolding out projects. Like, for example, you can tell it to go create your Blazor application, and that does X, Y, Z, and it'll actually do it. It's pretty good. Like, for little tiny demo apps, like if I'm trying to learn about something or I'm going to incorporate something in our application, I'm not going to tell it to go build this for my application. I'm going to say, build me a demo app that does X, Y, Z, and then you play around, you go back and forth with it, because it's not going to get it right, but it'll keep reiterating and give you a little small application that you can go look and learn and play with, because I feel like we learn a lot better if we have something small that you can play with and keep tweaking around, and once you learn it, then you can take that and put it into your much larger application, which is much more difficult to reiterate with, I think. So I think it's a huge benefit. I hear a common question from developers that, do we need to be worried with our jobs? It's a college graduate coming out of college with ChatGPT going to be good enough to replace a experienced senior developer? And my answer to that is, don't worry about ChatGPT replacing your job. Worry about developers who know how to use ChatGPT really well replacing your job. So you just need to be good with the tools and learn to use the tools to your benefit. Come find out. November 2nd, guys. All right, thank you very much, guys. Have a great evening.
Have a good night, guys.
It's been a pleasure, Tom. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, bye, y'all.
Bye.